On this episode of the DCeric Show, we go back to 1991 with Duke Nukem for PC, developed by Apogee software. When I was in high school, I wanted a computer, and a teacher of mine said he would offer me one. I had no clue he was offering me an old 386 computer with DOS. I asked him what I can do with the machine, and he showed me an operating system called GeoWorks. It was like Windows, but was specifically used for DOS software, and it came with its own software suite. So I asked him what kind of games could I play on the machine, and he showed me a bunch of games, and one of them including the shareware version of Duke Nukem. Funny thing is, I had no clue Duke Nukem had anything previous to Duke Nukem 3D, and let alone an action platformer. I enjoyed it, and I always wanted the whole collection of Duke Nukem with episodes 1, 2, and 3. I finally received the collection of Duke Nukem, which would include the complete set of episodes for the first and second game. Duke Nukem 1 and 2 was made to run on a DOS operating system, which nowadays makes it difficult to run on the Windows NT operating systems. But with the help of a DOS emulator called DOSBox, most if not all games including the Duke Nukem series can run on Windows NT, Mac OS X, and Linux operating systems. DOSBox has also been ported to a variety of video game consoles, handhelds, and even cell phones. Well, if you didn't notice already, the second version of Duke Nukem was spelled differently in the first game. Apogee changed the name to Duke Nukem, replacing the E with the U because a character from Captain Planet and the Planeteers had the same name, and they wanted to avoid a lawsuit. However, they found out the original Duke Nukem name that you see in the sequels wasn't registered, so they registered the name. Back in the 90s, companies were trying to make money off platformers because they were generally popular with a gaming audience, and that is thanks to Super Mario Bros. Released for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Duke Nukem, of course, was different than your average platformer, but it did good with the gaming audience and was soon followed by a number of sequels. In 1993, Duke Nukem 2 was released for PC and contains 4 episodes. It plays pretty much the same, but includes new enemies, new weapons, updated graphics, and a new story. Duke Nukem was released for the Game Boy Color in 1999. It plays identical to Duke Nukem 1 and 2. Some of the enemies resemble those from Duke Nukem 2, as well as the backgrounds, but the game has a new story, new levels, and new bosses. Duke Nukem 3D was released in 1996 for PC, and in 1997 and 98, it was ported to a variety of different platforms. The gameplay for Duke Nukem 3D brought big changes over its 2D platformers and now begins as a 3D first-person shooter. The game contains blood and gore and contains nudity and other adult content. The high scoreboard, which was in the previous games, was removed. Duke Nukem 3D also contains a voice actor who does the voice for Duke Nukem, and he is played by John St. John, who has done a variety of voices for other characters in other games. The game got a lot of good reviews, but some reviewers complained about the adult content. Even though there was complaints about the adult content, the game was a big hit to consumers. Duke Nukem Forever was released in 2011 and had the same concept of gameplay from Duke Nukem 3D, but the game had poor controls, crude comedy, and dated graphics. The game went through a long development phase and goes all the way back to 1997. From 1997 until 2010, the game kept going back into development and would halt. In 2009, Take-Two had a lawsuit against 3D Realms because of their constant delays on development of the game. The case was settled misconduct, and the party who filed the lawsuit was prohibited from refiling the case. 3D Realms abandoned further development of Duke Nukem Forever, and in 2010 the game went back into development to Gearbox Software. The game was released in 2011 for PC, Xbox 360, and PS3. It has poor reviews with consumers and dedicated gaming sites. There was 4 spin-offs released, which include Duke Nukem A Time to Kill for the PlayStation, Duke Nukem 0 Hour for the Nintendo 64, Duke Nukem Land of the Base for the PlayStation, and Duke Nukem Manhattan Project for Windows, which was later released for the Xbox 360. The spin-offs that were released for the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 played more like a third-person shooter. Duke Nukem Manhattan Project brought the game back to platforming with the characters and levels in 3D. The gameplay is identical to Duke Nukem 1 and 2, but the humor is identical to Duke Nukem 3D and following games. The first 2 Duke Nukem games in the series were developed by Apogee software. When Duke Nukem 3D was released, Apogee established 3D Realms. Essentially, 3D Realms would be used for most of the 3D games released, but at this time, 3D games were getting more popular, so Apogee dropped its name from future titles. But Apogee returned for the first time since the late 90s and designed Duke Nukem Critical Mass in 2008 for the Nintendo DS with development from Frontline Studios, and it was published by Deep Silver. The game didn't do very well due to poor gameplay and was to be released for PSP but got cancelled. Now, as the story goes, in Duke Nukem 1, Dr. Proton wants to take over the world with his minions, the Tech Bots. So there is one man who's decided to stop Dr. Proton from taking over the world, and that man is Duke Nukem. While Duke Nukem is a lot different than your average platformer, yes, there's a lot of jumping from one platform to another, but this game has weapons. Yes, you have a laser gun to destroy your enemies. There is also other items you can collect in the game that will help you complete the game. Some of these items would include a grapple, weapon upgrades, a special glove that unlocks platforms, and a high jump. In the game, you have to find the exit, but before doing so, you must find the keys that unlock specific areas in the game that will allow access to the main exit. While finding the exit, you will have to destroy hordes of enemies and watch out for obstacles that will try and stop you from defeating the level. Duke Nukem has 8 blocks of health. Anytime an enemy hits him, a block will be docked. There's cola cans, chicken, or magic orbs that can help you regain health. If you shoot a piece of chicken, it will turn into 2 pieces of chicken, and it will give you 2 blocks of health. There is canisters in the game that will have items in them, which include health items, items that will give you a high score, or chip cards that will allow you access to different parts of a level. This game also has a high scoreboard, so anytime you collect items or destroy enemies, you can get a high score. There's also high score bonuses in the game as well, which happen after collecting the letters D, U, K, and E. There's also objectives that will allow you to collect other bonuses in the game. If you decide to quit or even beat the game, you then can input your name and your score will be put on the high scoreboard. The game allows you to save in 9 different slots, which would allow more than one person to play their own game. The graphics in Duke Nukem aren't that spectacular, but that is expected for an old game. The game's graphics are comparable to most games released on the Nintendo Entertainment System. The sound in the game was pretty bad. I think the worst of it comes from beams you have to destroy at certain parts of some levels. They sound horrible and can pierce the ear quite a bit. The game's sound is generally bleeps and bloops, and there is no music in the game. The controls aren't too bad if you're a fan of using the keyboard. I used a program called Joy-to-Key, and I was able to use the Xbox 360 controller and was able to beat the game swiftly and easily. There is no difficulty setting in the game, but as you get further into the game, it can be quite difficult, depending on the level layout, where the enemies are scattered, and what kind of enemies are in the levels. If there is one thing that makes this game fun, it's the level layouts. They were done so very well. There's 3 episodes in Duke Nukem which completes the game's story, and it will give you hours of play. The first episode is available for free as shareware and takes place in Los Angeles. After you defeat Dr. Proton in the first episode, you go to Dr. Proton's secret moon base. After you once again defeat Dr. Proton in episode 2, he then escapes to the future in episode 3, which is the final episode, and Duke Nukem must go through time to put an end to Dr. Proton's schemes. Well, I guess I've come to the end of the show. I really had a lot of fun with this game and thought it was cool that it wasn't just your average platforming game. What made this game so cool is that each level had great layouts and the enemies were all placed in great spots for great difficulty. The weapons and items were unique and added more fun to the game. I wouldn't say the graphics were that amazing, but at the time of release it was comparable to most games released for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Duke Nukem had 3 episodes which gave you hours of play. The game also had a save feature which I thought was a good idea that meant more people could play their own game. I really enjoyed the high scoreboard. It wasn't just like a platforming game, it was like an arcade game as well, where you could compete against your friends' high scores. There's many enemies in the game, and each add their own strategy and difficulty to the game. The boss felt a little easy to me, but I think what really mattered was battling through each level, which had unique layouts. If you'd like to get your hands on Duke Nukem for PC, you can get it at www.gog.com, and it will come bundled with Duke Nukem 2. If you'd like to get your hands on the sequels and spin-offs mentioned in this video, you can get them on eBay or your local game shop. If you would like to play some old DOS games other than the Duke Nukem series, you can use DOSBox, which is available at www.dosbox.com. If you would like to use a joystick or other device, get Joy-to-Key from www.en.jtksoft.net. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the DCeric Show and come back to see another game I couldn't keep my hands off of.